Over the years, companies that I've started have hired dozens and dozens and dozens of people. Now, I'm probably the last person who has any kind of book knowledge about hiring your human resources. But what I have done is I've learned a lot through mistakes that I've made in hiring people. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you 6 big hiring mistakes that I've made over the years that I no longer make and that I don't want you to make either. Hey, I'm Andrew Henderson, and in this video, we're going to talk about hiring mistakes that I have made. I'm a big believer that entrepreneurs should learn from experience, and so rather than hiring a bunch of HR consultants to give me diplomatic bloviation, I have simply learned by experience. And I'm going to share that with you so that you don't have to make some of the same mistakes, because while I have learned a lot and while I feel like I'm in a pretty great position for hiring right now, it has been painful at times learning these mistakes. And so what's really been helpful in growing from 3 or 4 people about a year and a half ago to almost 20 people now is making sure we have a scalable hiring plan. So the number one mistake that I've really dialed in on is not following your intuition. Entrepreneurs are successful. People are successful because they have intuition. And what I think a lot of us have been programmed to do is not to follow it. We have an idea. We have a gut feeling. We think, okay, here's what I think about this person, and we walk away from it. Perhaps it's someone else in your organization who is sitting in on an interview with you and they say, yeah, but I think this. And then you think, okay, well, maybe they know something I don't, and you totally walk away from your intuition. If you're successful, you have a good intuition. That's what got you there, and so don't walk away from it. Own it, be honest with yourself, trust those gut feelings, and don't let other people talk you out of it, or in some cases even shame you out of it. That's a big one. The second thing is, don't put talent first. I have a lawyer friend. He's hired a lot of people for his law firm, and he's got a very simple mantra. He says, number one is that they are a good person. This is interesting because I think the environment that I grew up in, and really the environment that I guess I thought entrepreneurship was more appropriately when I was a kid was, it should be like Boiler Room. It should be like one of these, stock brokerage firms where like everybody's, cutthroat, and really, that's not what you want. What you want is people who are good people. You want people who are eager, but you want people who are just, decent human beings. I think that that's more important than talent, and I saw it growing up in my father's business. He would talk about people that he knew that had more talent but weren't as successful because they had attitude problems, because they had behavioral problems, because they were alcoholics, whatever the case may be. Talent really isn't number one. Number 3 is you don't necessarily want to look for specific talent. I had another friend who owned a radio station. And his radio station was profitable, much more profitable, which is very hard to do in the AM radio station business these days. He had a pretty highly profitable radio station, but it wasn't sexy. It was the epitome of my have an unsexy business idea. He had a radio station that basically did what I used to do in a business many moons ago, which was they had a lot of paid programming on their radio station. People would come in and they would pay to host a show about being a mortgage broker, for example, and they would basically have an hour-long educational show on mortgages with a pitch at the end. And that meant they were very profitable. But what it meant was whenever he needed people to come in and run their boards and push the buttons, it was hard for him to recruit from other people in the industry, because the people who worked at the big, sexy stations, maybe they got fired or they got laid off because those stations were all, collapsing and they weren't making any money. He would have the money to pay them, but they would come in and they would be condescending because this wasn't the big time anymore. And I remember giving him this advice about 10 years ago that this actually served me very well. He said, or I told him, I said, go and hire someone who works at the zoo. And what I meant was, find someone who's not in the radio business. Find someone who doesn't have the condescending attitude. Find someone who, in fact, has the eagerness that I just talked about a moment ago. Wow, I'm working in radio, who maybe doesn't know the difference, or they're just grateful to be working in radio because, maybe they were, helping people try on shoes at the Payless shoe store, last week. And so this is a step up. And I said, it's not that difficult to train someone how to run a board. In our business, what I've found is every time I hire someone who has big experience, they're a human resources expert, it's just not a fit for the highly entrepreneurial, get results culture that I have. Whenever we've hired people for media positions, I like to bring them in and I like to train them. You know what? You can train someone how to do SEO. You can train someone how to put videos on YouTube. You can train someone on a lot of things. And so if you have skills and if you have procedures, which you should in your company, then you might want to consider hiring someone who doesn't have your specific talent. They have a great attitude first, they're a good person, then they do have general talent. We don't want people with no talent. We don't want, buffoons. We want people who have teachable talent, but they're also good people. And so I think that's something really important that I've learned. Don't necessarily go and say, I need to hire someone with this exact talent, because a lot of times you're going to get their previous work culture brought into yours, and that may not be a fit. Number 4 is you really have to screen out disagreeable people. Now this comes back to, are they a good person? But I want you to be particularly mindful, because I've made this mistake far too often, of finding people who are disagreeable. It was funny. We had someone who worked here, and I remember someone finally told me, I said, do you realize every time you're talking to this person and you say an idea, they say, yeah, but... Now, part of this comes down to, management style. This has been a mistake on management style, where you don't want to be constantly seeking opinions. You want to seek opinions, you want to have your door open, but you don't want it to be where people come in, and I've had this happen, where you hire someone, here's the job description, and they're like, great, I have my list of ideas, how we can improve things. No, we're not looking for the ideas yet. We need you to execute first, and then, yes, we'd love to hear your ideas. I love getting ideas from people on my team, but if you just come in and sidestep what I'm doing, and what I need you to do, and just immediately go to, here's my list of ideas, then that's not what I'm looking for. And so that's why, we've had challenges at times bringing in consultants, because a lot of consultants and freelance consultants like to say, okay, I'll handle A, B, and C. And then when they come in, oh no, it's really over here. This is what you need. And sometimes that's right. Sometimes they're correct. Obviously you do want to defer to people who have more knowledge. I talked about, when should you be a control freak? When you know something about the topic. But you also need to hold people accountable. And so if you're bringing on people who are disagreeable, you're always going to be struggling to hold them accountable. You're always going to be struggling just to have a good office culture. And you know what? Even for you as the manager, the boss, the owner of the company, you want to have a good environment for yourself as well. Because if you're constantly in a bad mood because people are arguing with you and being disagreeable and just being generally difficult, then that's going to bring you down. It's going to make you less productive. It's going to bring you out of all the innovation and dreaming that you're doing that's pushing the company forward. And so I know some people disagree with this. They said, Andrew, who are you to say people should or shouldn't be disagreeable? Maybe you should be better. Listen, some people are just a pleasure to get along with. They do the job. They understand their role in the company. And those are the people, ironically, that succeed and get the things that the people who are disagreeable wish they could have and are fighting for. It's just a matter of tactics. You want someone with a tactic that is cooperative. Number 5 is the person who is too smart or wants to be in control. We've had some of this. I've got to admit, I'm kind of a sucker for this. The person who kind of like is that consultant, and the person who comes to you and says, let me kind of help you out first, right? Let me give you a few ideas. Okay, that's interesting. What I found is the smartest people, the most talented people, are the ones who don't talk about it. And I think that applies to a lot of things in life. It's perhaps just common sense. But when someone comes and they're constantly, here's, I have these great ideas and I'm excellent and this and that. Those are the people that more often than not, they don't deliver as much. They're not delivering the results, because what I found is the big personalities that come into a team. Listen, if you're a big personality as an entrepreneur, you may well get things done. I've got a certain personality, right? But I'm not trying to go and work in someone else's organization. Okay, and so what I've seen is the people. I was talking to a friend of mine recently. He knew someone from our team, a couple of years ago, and said, "Yeah, remember that person? Like they thought they were a lot smarter than they were." Okay, and so if you're going to hire talent, and if you're going to evaluate talent, it has to be based on your own evaluation, not based on someone else's evaluation that you just say, "Oh, okay, great." I've been far too malleable in the past about just accepting what other people say. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You say you're a super genius. Well, you must be a super genius then, right? I mean, you really want to have your own independent evaluation. The 6th and last thing that I've learned is you can never settle for good enough. There was a guy in the consulting space recently who put out, I think it was a video, where he said, I interviewed over like 600 people, I think he said, to hire 3 to be managers in my company. 600 interviews. One of my biggest problems about good enough has been I'm not the most patient person. If you watch my videos, I like go, 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 do, heck yes or no, like let's do it. I just impulse bought an apartment, the other day. I just like doing things. I like getting the results. And what I found is that generally works for me. And the stuff that doesn't work for me, the 10% where it doesn't work, I can just circle back and learn from it and clean up the mess and move forward. But when it comes to hiring, that's not really the right approach, and which is why I've had to defer to people who have some experience. I've deferred to other more calm, more mature entrepreneurs, not necessarily HR consultants, but people who've hired a lot of people in their companies to help me put together an interview process. Because if it were me, I just talk to people and it's like, okay, you sing great, you're hired, let's go. And then I would get people who were disagreeable. I would get people who thought they were smarter than they were, people who were just, had all kinds of problems. And then the second problem I would do is I wouldn't fire them quickly. I would just keep them around for far too long. And what I would do is then internalize and say, well, I must be bad. It must be my problem. The great so-and-so, they couldn't possibly be wrong. I would internalize it, okay? And so those are all individual problems on their own. But all that stemmed from accepting people who were quote-unquote good enough because I was impatient. I'm not saying those people necessarily were a disaster in terms of their performance, but they had a lot of cultural issues and it just caused a lot of internal problems, not necessarily problems outside of the company, problems inside the company. And so you want to make sure you're finding the perfect fit. You don't want to settle. Now, sometimes you're going to go out and you're just going to need to find 5 people. You need to hire 5 people for positions and you're going to kind of promote from within. And so maybe 3 of them will stick, 1 of them will get promoted, 2 of them will stay there, 2 of them won't make it, whether they have to be replaced or they just leave on their own. But I think you don't just you don't want to say, oh, I hope it'll work or they'll be good enough. Take the time, And for me, it was going from 1 interview, which I think most people who hire would say, Andrew, that's ridiculous. But that's what I did up until several years ago. Now, we do 3 interviews, 4 interviews. We really make it much more intense, which gives us more opportunities. And we give each interview a name, by the way. Here's what we're evaluating in this interview so that we catch everything, so that we're never just hiring good enough. If you hire just good enough, what I found is, you have a situation where they're doing kind of the grunt work, but you're still doing the thinking. If you're hiring someone for social media, and that's like your one social media person, they need to not necessarily innovate. You should give them some tools, but they need to be able to figure out the strategy based on what you taught them. And so if you're constantly doing the social media strategy and they're just kind of posting this stuff, that's just good enough. You need someone who can lead. My friend Dan Andrews said, if you have 15 or fewer employees, they better all be A players. You're not running an insurance company where you have some people who are just kind of dead weight. You don't have room for dead weight. So you want to make sure that everyone is on the ball. So those are some mistakes I made. I'd love for you to leave a comment below if you've hired, if you've fired. It's never pleasant to bring the wrong people on board or even to have to remove them. But leave a comment below. I want to know what you think I'm missing. What mistakes have you made? What would you add to this? I want to hear from you. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist. I wrote this book, which you can find on Amazon, to distill a lot of the stuff we talk about in these videos and a lot of the stuff I've learned over the last decade plus traveling all around the world, teaching you about how to legally reduce your taxes, build your personal freedom, and create wealth faster. Definitely get a copy of this book if you want to learn more. Now, if you want to watch more videos, make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you click the notifications bell so you never miss one of our new videos with more tips on how to go where you're treated best. And if you're already a 6- or 7-figure entrepreneur and you'd like to put these strategies in place for yourself, go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn about how I can help you.